Welcome to Unlock Profits webinar. Do you know what your customer really wants? Do you think you're missing out on the market share? Did you know that by improving quality, you can actually reduce costs? I promise that some of your myths will be broken today, and this webinar will be a breakthrough for a lot of us. My name is Nehal Vora, and I'm pleased to be moderating the session today along with Vartika Sethi. We've had an overwhelming response with over 500 attendees from across the globe attending the webinar today. Our attendees are from different industries like manufacturing, retail, jewelry, education, family managed businesses, and many more industries. We also have students and fresh graduates from various global institutes joining us today. Thank you so much for taking our time and joining us. We will have a Q&A at the end. However, feel free to type in your questions in the chat panel and our speakers will address them as we progress. Talking about our speakers, it's time to introduce them. Both speakers are geniuses in many ways. Introducing our first speaker, Dr. S.T. Gondalekar, fondly known as Dr. G, is the Dean of the Family Managed Business Program at Wellinger Institute. He has been in the field of operations for over 35 years, trained in Japan and consulted all over the world. The only continent he is not consulted in is Antarctica. How cool is that? He has contributed in bringing big gains to his clients and his students. His students, especially from the Family Managed Business Program, have experienced 5 times turnover, 50% cost reduction, and launched zero investment businesses. Dr. G has numerous books authored and co-authored with his students, and some of which are what you see on the screen. Chronicles of a Quality Detective was Dr. G's first book, and his latest book, You Don't Have to Be Rich to Solve Problems, launched just last month and has stories of second and third generation entrepreneurs using simple techniques to solve business problems. Get ready for a sneak peek on Dr. G's tried and tested methods today. Our next speaker has 2 TEDx talks to his credit, is a design thinker and an innovation and strategy evangelist. He helps companies reinvent their business model and is a founder of Potential and Possibilities. He consults large corporates on how to enhance their innovation quotient and trains and inspires executives and students in design thinking and breakthrough thinking. A teacher at heart, Dr. Kaustav Dhargalkar, also fondly known as KD Sir, is a visiting faculty at top institutes in India, and our team has had the privilege of being his students and applying his customer-centric innovation principles in real-life projects. KD Sir has a feather on the cap with the launch of his latest book, It's Logical, Innovating Profitable Business Models. The book is simple to understand, engaging, and insightful. It's like a whack on the head and opens up horizons of invaluable possibilities. It's time now to introduce our team behind the scenes. What's common between all of us is that we're all Wellinger Institute alumni and our KD Sirs and Dr. G's ex-students. We're all trained in Japan and have experienced the high productivity and quality culture. Let me begin by introducing Dr. Samir Karkhanis, who is the CEO of the global edutech company Yangpu Executive Education. He has experience working with large corporates, and his expertise is in enterprise sales, growth hacking, digital transformation, strategic alliances, design thinking, and business development. Next on our team is Shrutika Deshmukh, who is co-presenting with Dr. G and is a consultant at KIAP. She's a visiting faculty at Wellinger Institute and NMIMS and is also pursuing her PhD in lean management. Next on our team is Rashmi Kamkar, who's also co-presenting with Dr. G and is a mechanical engineer, a postgraduate in business design from Wellinger Institute, and she's interned in Mattel Bangkok and has prior work experience in IT. Vartika Sethi is an entrepreneur, freelancer, and the founder of Jewel Story, which is a fine jewelry brand. She has over 10 years of work experience in the luxury goods and jewelry industry. She's skilled in Kaizen, design thinking, and jewelry manufacturing, along with a strong business development mindset. The last but not the least on the team is me, Nehal Vora, and I'm a talent development professional and I work for a global hospitality company based in Dubai. I bring with me over 10 years of experience in learning and development and human resources across various sectors. Before we kick start, on behalf of our team, I'd like to say a big thank you to Yangpo Education and to Amit Kumar, the CEO of MSMEX, to have helped us promote this webinar. We really appreciate all your efforts. It's time now for our first speaker, Dr. G, to take over. Dr. G, we know you're all set.
Here we go. Thank you, everybody. Welcome all. There is a very wide audience, I know, and there are people from various industries, manufacturing, service, IT. There are students, parents. I welcome them all. All these people here are actually students, and all these ladies here are students of Dr. Kaustubh and me both. So welcome all of you, and let's get going. The first point is quality and cost related directly or opposite? Most people believe, go and ask people, what is the relation between quality and cost? If you increase quality, will your cost go up or will it go down? And most people believe that the relationship is that if you increase quality, cost will go up. So they try to give you as less quality as possible as long as the customer can tolerate. But actually the truth is something else. The truth is that this is not the real relationship. The real relationship is a bit like this. It's an opposite relationship. If you increase quality, your cost will go down. And we have here Rashmi Kamkar. And Rashmi is going to tell you, she is one of the finest budding quality experts. She's going to tell you some concrete way in which she has contributed to increasing the quality and reducing the cost. So can you take over, Rashmi? This is a bonus for all those who came on time, because in the first 10 minutes, you're going to get a concrete improvement plan. You can implement from tomorrow what Rashmi tells you today. Go ahead.
Yes, there's a simple
Rashmi,
way.
please go ahead.
Yes, there's a simple way to improve quality with zero monetary investment. That is to attack the rework. So you might have heard of the saying, too many cooks spoil the broth. Similar way, if you rework a lot on the material, handle it n number of times till you get the output, it is going to spoil it and give a degraded quality of the same. Have a look at this bangle. Suppose I work on this and give it to the quality inspector to check it. It comes back to me saying that the stones are loose or any other defect comes up in this. I rework on it. Meanwhile, I've tightened it, I've filed it, I've done n number of processes to get it right. So then it goes and gets finally approved. But did you notice that too much working on this product is going to make it lose its natural shine and shimmer, some aesthetics, some dimensional qualities? That is, rework is not going to help us give the best quality product to our customer. So we need to attack it. we need to give them the first time right product. So we have a technique that we learned in Japan. Japan is a highly visual country, and that's what we've gained from it. We are going to show you a simple technique of making first time pass board. Okay, so you visually show things and update the status. I'll show you how. Here, I'm showing you a board. Currently, it's on a paper, but once you start doing this, you can do it on a whiteboard. It has a simple format, the department, the date, and I am recording it in the first half of my day, so that in the second half, I can take action on the data that gets filled in here. So I have my operators here. I have given them certain amount of pieces to work on. For now, let's just assume these are jewelry pieces that I've given them to work on. And this is the delivery that is first time correct, that is first time bang on product. So supposing Ajay has given me 6 pieces correct and 4 of them were not so good, so I've gone back for a rework to Ajay. So this is how my department performance looks like in the first half of the day. So this gives me the opportunity to work on this and improve the overall output in the second half. It's a no-brainer here that Rakesh and Suresh have not been performing as expected. More than 50% of the allocated items have gone back for a rework, while our star performer Vijay has given all the 10 pieces correct. So there's something different that he's been doing as compared to them. What if in the second half, once they come back, I ask Vijay to go to Rakesh and Suresh and see how they're working on their pieces, give them tips and guidance so that even Rakesh and Suresh tend to be the star performers. This way, we will not have only one star performer in the department, but the whole department becomes a star performer together. The psychology behind putting this board up is that no one wants their lagging performance to be shown in front of everyone. It's just like a report card for you. So the best performers feel boosted. They want to hire up, they match up their game, and the lagging performers push in hard so that they can deliver better results the next time the scores are updated. So this way, everyone psychologically wants to be the star performer and your department output is going to increase. And like Dr. Deming says, who's a quality guru, he said that quality is the pride of workmanship. So they should take pride in delivering the first time pass products to their customers. So the best thing that we need to take out from this FTP or the first time pass board is that we need to early detect and immediately correct things. So we need not check at the end of the day, the whole day has gone wasted. Check it in the first half, check it hourly so that in the next coming hours you can take action on it. And overall, you know where your team lacks and needs training in. So that would help. And this is a zero investment thing. You can start right away. So always remember, early detect and immediately correct. Dr. G, you want to add on to it? You're on mute, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you very much. That was a lovely presentation, Rashmi. And we already have one comment from Pooja Arora saying, thank you for giving us a quick, valuable lesson.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
If I can add on to it, if
Yes.
people are feeling that this FTP board is just related to the manufacturing sector, then let me tell you that this goes across all the sectors. The 10 pieces that I showed you can be different for each one of you present in the webinar. Like for an insurance sector, you can have 10 customers to reach out to. So do the customers fill in the form first time correct, or do you have to follow up, go back to them again, get the correct information? If you're an IT SaaS company, you might have 10 accounts to handle. Are you doing it correctly? If you are just a pathology lab in these days, so do you get the blood samples right? Do you mix it up? Do you give wrong reports? So first time pass is really mandatory and uncompromised in any industry. So it goes across industries.
That's great. Yes. And Rashmi has experience in IT. She knows what she's talking. And she has been to Japan, visited Toyota and some of the other great companies and seen how the quality can be made to work to reduce the cost. So thank you very much for that. And we have a concrete lesson. What is the lesson? The lesson is use psychology and technology together with this first time pass board and improve your quality, reduce your rework. The moment you do that, the moment you reduce rework, what happens? Your cost goes down and your quality goes up. So quality up, cost down. This is a magic formula and it can be applied tomorrow. All that you're doing is making it public, letting people see my performance. And as Rashmi pointed out, nobody likes his or her performance to show up not so good. Yeah. We don't want to make star performers. Anil Jain, Doshi, we don't want star performers. We want everybody to be excellent performers. There was a question on that. So I'm answering that. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent performer. Everybody. Because making winners and losers, you will not get quality. Everybody needs to be a winner. Right? Now, this is whatever is the standard. Are we achieving the standard? Right? However, have we set the standard correctly? Now, this takes you back to the customer and this will take you into a different area of quality. It's called the quality triangle. It starts with the customer needs, then goes to the specifications and then meeting of the specifications. So right now what Rashmi pointed out, from specifications, can you meet the specifications? No rework. And you reduce cost here by improving quality. But did you get the specifications right? Did you catch the customer's needs correctly? We have a genius here who can answer, right? And the genius is right here, Dr. Kaustubh Dhargarkar. He has great experience in what people call as design thinking, and innovation and creativity. Most important of all, if you read his book, and do read his book, I read the first chapter and I started dancing. I said, wow, because he pointed out that customers themselves many times don't know what they want. It's called latent need. And he's a master at identifying all this. So may I request Dr. Dhargarkar to Kaustubh Dhargarkar to take over.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Rashmi, and thank you, your team, Dr. G and team, for having me over. And it's always an honor to share the dais with somebody like Dr. G. So thank you, Dr. G, for considering me worth enough to be on this panel. Thanks. And welcome all panelists. We are here to give you value for your time. And that's the aim that we work with, because you are the customer and you are the focus. So let me just share I have a small brief PowerPoint. I hope the PowerPoint is visible to all of you. As Dr. G mentioned, customer is the beginning of everything. So I want you to answer one question. Who is the first stakeholder of your business? Many of us say it is the founder. Some might say it is the majority or the primary investor, etc., etc., etc. But I completely disagree with this. And I say that your customer or the consumer is the main stakeholder, most primary stakeholder of your business. Now, I'm not going to go into some theory and, quote Peter Drucker and stuff like that to make the point. I'm going to talk about my personal examples and how keeping the customer in the center helped me in my business. So I'm going to talk about a success story as well as a failure, as well as a disastrous story of failure as well, both from my experience. All right. I started my business way back in 1990, manufacturing something like this. This is a very crude picture of 1992. So you can, it's a nostalgic picture for me. This is what we started manufacturing, what is called as an impact press. And the various applications of these presses would be, punching of holes in sheet metal, or marking your logo on a finished product, or doing some quick assembly, riveting operation, etc. So basically, this was what would replace a hammer in those times. These operations on the shop floor earlier would probably be done with hammers, etc. So we were trying to replace that, etc., etc. And we got a good response to this product in the first 1.5 years or so. Market increased. We introduced different types of presses, from manual presses, we introduced pneumatic presses, etc. And about a year and a half later, I realized that customers are not coming to me to buy a press. I'm repeating, customers are not coming to me to buy a press, but they are coming to me to reduce the effort of the workers on their assembly line in order to enhance the productivity of their assembly lines. So they wanted to basically reduce the effort, reduce the cost, improve the throughput, and improve profits. So basically, after thinking on these things, it took me about a year and a half to realize that these guys are not coming to me to buy a press, but they are coming to me to enhance the productivity of their assembly lines. So the next question logically came to my mind was that what do they require to enhance the productivity of their assembly lines? What else would they need to enhance the productivity of their assembly lines? And within our team, we kept on talking, brainstorming, etc. And the answers were logical after that. They need something like indexing tables to enhance the productivity of their assembly lines. Indexing tables are, you must have seen videos of packaging lines of bottling plants and things like that. The bottles come on an automated conveyor belt, and they get engaged. Each bottle gets engaged in a round plate, and that plate keeps on moving at specific angles. At the first station, maybe the bottle gets cleaned with water or some liquid. At the second station, it goes ahead, gets dried. At the third station, the actual liquid gets dispensed and the bottle gets filled up. At the fourth station, it gets capped. At the fifth station, it gets, maybe the packaging sticker is stuck on it. At the fourth station, the manufacturing date, batch number, etc. are printed on it. And the next station, it goes out into the packaging line. So these are indexing tables, basically meant for enhancing the productivity of your assembly line. Then we realized that customers also want some automatic feeders of small components so that workers can do it more efficiently, and doing it manually, otherwise something would fall down, etc., etc. Feeding automatic would enhance the productivity of their assembly lines. Then we went into special purpose equipment, special purpose machines, custom made machines. Then we went into these linear motion controllers. So basically everything that enhanced the productivity of the assembly line of the customers. Then we also went into miniature robotics back then, pick and place units and stuff like that. Now, my point was, when this realization stuck, that the customer is not coming to me to buy a press, but to enhance the productivity of his or her assembly line. Did we have the capability to manufacture all of this? No, we did not have the capability to manufacture all of this. So what was the next stand that we could take? The next stand that we took was that we collaborated with these manufacturers to begin with and started giving complete end-to-end solutions to customers. So we actually became a one-stop shop for the customer to enhance the productivity of their entire assembly line. And we initially kind of just were an integrator of these entire assembly lines. And gradually then we discovered that some of the vendors that we are tied up with were not up to the mark in terms of specifications, etc. So we developed more vendors, we developed some in-house capabilities we developed for manufacturing, etc. So, and in the next 5 years or so, from 1992 to 97, our product portfolio changed completely, and we became known as a one-stop shop for enhancing the assembly lines of our customers. And from that positioning, we actually got entries into large companies such as we worked on the first assembly line of Indica for Tata Motors. We worked with Eicher. We worked with some Japanese companies, Panasonic, etc., etc. And so basically the point that I'm trying to put across is that in that first 1.5 to 2 years, when the realization came that the customer is not coming to me to buy a press, he or she is coming to me to enhance the productivity of his assembly line. That was a big turning point in the way we started looking at our business. And then it was a success story, growth story, whatever you call it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to brag about my old business, but by the beginning of 2000, we had 2 offers, one from a German company and one from a US based company, to have tie-ups with them to actually manufacture goods for their Asia Pac segments. Now, this would not have happened had we kept on thinking that we are in the business of manufacturing presses. We would have continued, we would have maybe come up with better presses, pneumatic presses, hydraulic presses, mechanical presses, servo control presses. But when we actually realized from the customer's viewpoint, why the hell is that customer coming to me? And that answer, I think, was a turning point in this whole story. And that led to the entire kind of, our product portfolio changed completely, and we could actually command a big premium in the market because we used to give turnkey solutions, complete end-to-end solutions. So that's the power of thinking, or rather putting your shoes in the customer's, putting your feet in the customer's shoes and thinking from that side. Now, so we moved from presses to productivity enhancement. That was the turning point. Now, that means the primary objective of a business is to understand the customer, understand the consumer. Everything else follows later. So that's why Dr. G has kept the customer at the top of the vertex of the triangle that he mentioned to you. The rest follow from that. But initial focus has to be on understanding the consumer. Next point I'm going to talk to you about, I told you about a success story. Now listen to a disastrous failure. Now, these impact presses, which I showed you, were a big hit in the small switchgear kind of market. We used to sell it to switch manufacturers. The major customer of ours back then was a company called Anchor Switches. Almost every month we used to sell something like 20-25 of those hand-operated impact presses. And other switch manufacturers automatically took on, because the leader in that space, that is Anchor, was using our machines. So that was a big growth market for us. And somewhere in 95, 96, Anchor was in discussions with a Korean company, Daewoo Electronics, for a tie-up with their with the Korean company. And before the tie-up, Anchor wanted to create an image that they were doing everything very systematically, scientifically, etc., etc., etc. So they came to us to design some high-tech testing equipment for their switches. We thought it was very high-tech, and to impress a Korean company, we created fancy, pneumatic system with human touch and stuff like that. And, we used some silicone molds and actual finger replication, etc., to turn switches on and off, etc., to simulate the whole process with fancy displays, back in the mid 90s. And I set up a new company dedicated completely to this activity. And what happened was later on, that whole tie-up between Anchor and Daewoo just fell through. It did not happen. So I was left with this factory, with setting up this plant, having manufactured almost 30 of such testing equipments, thinking that these are now going to go into the Anchor's assembly lines before that tie-up happens, because Anchor wanted to show their world-class manufacturing facilities, etc. And I was stuck with those expensive 30 things made. Now, my stand was that there are so many switch manufacturers that are there that are already our customers. I will sell at least one equipment to one of those equipments through that factory to other switch manufacturers. I took the stand that we have developed this great technology, this high-tech machine, etc. It's going to just sell like hotcakes. What if Anchor has not bought, Daewoo hasn't gone? They had picked up at least one or two of our machines. So other switch manufacturers also would need it. So that was an assumption that we made. And finally, we realized that the other switch manufacturers actually did not need such a high-tech thing. They actually made do with some local competitors who had made a simple mechanical testing machine for themselves. Now, why I'm telling you this is because we kept on thinking that we have this high-tech equipment. We have impressed the Koreans. Now, why wouldn't these Indian manufacturers, small manufacturers, buy it? We kept thinking from the perspective of what we had created rather than what the customer was seeking. The local Indian customer was seeking a testing equipment which would do his or her job. They did not need high-tech fancy displays and things like that. They needed to kind of adhere to the ISI norms of testing a switch for 50,000 cycles. And the equipment that was manufactured by our competitors actually took off in the market, and we were left stuck with this inventory plus this additional factory which was started, and a big hole in our pockets, which took about 3 years for me to get out of. By 2000 or so, which that hole kind of got sealed. So the moral of the story here is that we were stuck with what we were making, and we were trying to sell what we were making. We were not trying to make what might sell, would have been picked up by the other smaller manufacturers in the switch industry. Had we done that, we would have not been in that hole for 3 long years. So these are 2 points which I want to kind of make. One, the first one, the success story happened when we put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and thought from that perspective. And the second, the failure came when we our ego came in the way and said, oh, we have made this high-tech stuff, great technology stuff, everybody is going to buy it. And we were trying to thrust that into the customer's mouth. The customer was not willing even to open the mouth. And it burnt a hole in our pocket, big time hole in our pocket. So that's what happens when you lose focus of your customer. So read these 2 sentences on screen. Don't just sell what you make, try to make what might sell. And if you try to make what might sell, you will always be relevant in the market. And I'm using the word might because how much ever you do your research with your user, there is a possibility that you may not have understood him or her correctly. So how do you now minimize that misunderstanding? There is how to minimize failure. What I have is a small term called last mile user connect. How do I establish last mile user connect with the customer? How do I understand what he or she really needs? So when we used to devise these automated assembly line solutions to them, I remember we used to spend at least 3 to 4 shifts at the assembly line, understanding the whole process, which was done manually, then come back to our drawing board, kind of put some block diagrams, etc., discuss it back with the managers there. Once again, go to the assembly lines, do some small prototyping to check for workflow, etc. Come back, learn some lessons, come back. And it used to happen iteratively before we used to really finalize that whole design. So that customer-centric approach helped us big time in being able to attract those 2 German and 1 US-based company for a tie-up. Now, and these are some examples which I took from a SME like me, small and medium enterprise like me back then. Now I'm going to take an example of a mid-sized corporate of last mile user connect. What I mean by last mile user connect. This is about a 3-year-old story. I do consulting with companies on strategic innovation or new product development, new business model creation, etc. I'm going to talk about a story from that experience. This was a telecalling BPO about somewhere in the beginning of 2018, end of 2017. That's when they came to me with problem saying that over the previous 5 years, we have undertaken an exercise of digital transformation, but still we have not been able to improve process efficiencies in certain processes. Still we are not very satisfied with that whole exercise. So we want to work in depth with these kinds of things along with you. So my first question was, rather than blanketly start with all processes, let us pick up one process which according to you is the most inefficient process. So they said the most inefficient process is the telecalling process. These people keep on calling us for selling credit cards and auto loans and home loans and things like that. And even if we say no, they keep on calling us multiple times. That means the process is very inefficient. Imagine the time spent, the effort spent, the money spent, all that manpower, etc., spent is too much. That's what increases the cost. Now, these guys said in the beginning that I said, let's tackle that problem first. And then the attitude of that company was, oh, let us start with a design thinking, creative problem solving kind of breakthrough innovation workshop for the senior management people, and then they will trickle it down to the entire organization. I said, no, sorry. If you want to improve a process, you better involve the entire team which is involved in the process. So after a few back and forth, they agreed. And we had a team of about 19 or 20 of them working on this project. Right from the senior management to the general manager, to the solution architect, to the techies. And in the team, I insisted that there have to be the people who actually pick up a receiver and talk to the customer or the prospect. That is the telecalling executive. And this workshop began on the appointed day at about 9:30 in the morning. And my general practice is, even if I have found out enough information about their operations, I want to know it from the horse's mouth. So the first 2 hours, I was kind of taking a feedback from them. What have they done right? What has succeeded? What has failed? Etc. etc. And at the first coffee break around 11:30, 11:45 or so, I had noticed by then these two telecalling executives had not opened their mouth at all. Not at all. Only the senior management were hogging the limelight. They were talking about these big time statistical techniques that they have used to enhance quality and quality of service goals and X, Y, Z. A lot of things were being discussed. And these two had not opened their mouth. So in the coffee break, I took the opportunity to kind of make them talk a little bit. And after cajoling them a little, one of them, these telecalling executives, one of them said, when I put on my headphones and talk to a prospect, in the first 5 to 6 sentences that the prospect utters, I kind of understand from the voice tone, I kind of get a subjective judgmental feeling whether this call is going to get converted, whether this customer, the prospect is open to listening to me or is closed or is not going to buy our stuff, etc. I get a very subjective kind of a judgment, so to say, a feeling about the call. And that appealed to me a lot. This was a subjective judgment, which appealed a lot. And when we restarted after the break, I made this person, this telecaller, stand up and speak out what he told me during the break. Very shyly, timidly he spoke. And after he finished, instantly all the other people just pounced on that fellow saying, we have 3,500 telecallers making 40 to 60 calls per 8-hour shift. That means we have about 175,000 to 2 lakh calls being made per 8-hour shift. And if we were to take into account the qualitative judgment of each of these calls, it would be impossible to operate at scale. Now that was a big problem in terms of scaling of operations. I'm sure you understand the complexity of taking subjective judgment of so many calls. Valid objection, but that had appealed to me a lot. So we kept on discussing, and credit to the senior management folks, they didn't discount it. They at least kept the discussion open. And I'm telling you, within the first 10 to 12 minutes of this discussion, one of the techies from the corner said, what are you talking about here? You're talking about subjective judgment based on the voice tone of a person. A voice tone is actually a sound wave, and a sound wave has amplitude, has wavelength, and has frequency. And all these 3 parameters are perfectly measurable. So now the next task is this qualitative judgment needs to be converted to something quantitative, for which you need a record of past call logs. Now that's what struck me at that time, was that every time these telecallers call us, most of the time, sometimes there is a pre-recorded message that this call may be recorded for training and quality purposes, which meant they have call logs recorded. So my next question was, do you have call logs recorded of old calls? So they said yes. The VP, senior most guy, sent somebody outside to find out how many call logs are recorded. The fellow came back in 2 minutes saying that we have a record of 45 lakh call logs recorded over the previous 10 years of their operations. That 45 lakh call logs is a huge data set. Then the next question was, are the outcomes of these call logs also documented? They said, yes, it is documented. That means which prospect was needed to be called 20 times before conversion, which got converted 5 times, which never got converted despite 25 calls, which got converted after 10 calls, 15 calls, etc. So all that data was there. And the 45 lakh call log recordings were there, sound recordings were there. So now the next obvious question was to do a pattern recognition exercise between the voice tones of those 45 lakh calls along with the outcomes received. So that means they needed a speech recognition engine, so to say, at the back end to understand that. This was now a technology that they did not have in-house. So then we looked around, and in the startup ecosystem, because I'm connected with a lot of technology business incubators across the country, we found some startup in some corner doing some very cool stuff with speech recognition technology. And these two came together, this BPO and the startup. And it took them about 7.5 months to develop a voice recognition engine at the back end, which categorized the voice tones of these 45 lakh call logs. Pattern recognized is with the outcome. So what happened was that voice recognition engine identified 5 patterns. Voice tone pattern A corresponds to an outright conversion of the prospect. Voice tone pattern B corresponds to a maybe yes from the prospect. Voice tone pattern C is a maybe yes, maybe no fringe prospect. Voice tone pattern D is maybe no, and voice tone pattern E is an outright no from the prospect. Now, this was a clear pattern recognition, voice recognition engine developed, and it's a self-learning algorithm. 4 months back, just before the lockdown, I had checked with this BPO how the system is operating, and they said that today that voice engine has reached efficiency such that when our telecaller calls a prospect, within the first 12 words that the prospect utters, our backend voice engine analyzes that person's voice tone and quickly categorizes that voice tone into this pattern A, pattern B, pattern C, pattern D, or pattern E. And depending on what pattern the prospect's voice falls in, that pattern is displayed on the telecaller's screen in front. And the next conversation flow, what the telecaller should speak to the customer also gets flashed in front on the telecaller's window. Now, here is where the whole magic of saving cost, saving manpower, saving human effort, and low rework. The number of calls that one has to do to the same prospect has gone down because specific targeting segmentation happens. Customers who are in the category of E, that is not possible to get converted, are not pestered again and again. Those customers are put through another sales channel, and that conversion may happen, may not happen, but that unnecessary pestering for them goes away. Thus, reducing cost, reducing effort, reducing time spent, and at the same time, improving quality. Now, that's something that works across the board. So as Dr. G mentioned, quality and cost need not go as a linear equation. It need not be directly proportional. When you bring quality up, your costs invariably go down. That's where I will stop and hand it over to Dr. G. And some things we can talk about in the Q&A session also. I don't want to overshoot my time. Thank you.
So nice of you, Dr. Kaustubh,
Thank you, sir.
some comments which have come on the chat. The best comment is after your session is WOW. Wow. Okay. And another comment is that you have given a beautiful example which has hit them and communicated very nicely. Thank you so much. And that is the beauty of this genius sitting next to me. Dr. Kaustubh knows what is in the customer's mind. Who is the customer now? You, ladies and gentlemen, sitting in the audience are the customer. And Dr. Kaustubh is able to get exactly to what is of interest to you, gives it, and your comment is, wow. Thank you, doctor. Coming to then, once you have the customers identified, the customers' requirements identified correctly, you know, that call story was fantastic. How you can identify and how you can convert it into a specification, yeah, in terms of amplitude and frequency and all that sort of stuff. Now, once you have got the specification, the biggest challenge is meeting the specifications. And there is one more trick. I'm just going to give you tricks, ways of improving quality without cost, in fact, and reduce the cost. Increase the quality, reduce the cost. Keep that firmly in your mind. There's another trick, and this trick is called quality at source. Can I request my other colleague, Ms. Shrutika Deshmukh Patil, to come in and give us an example? She's actually going to demonstrate to us. You know, most of the webinars are boring because they put up one slide and they read from the slide and there's a tiny handwriting. We said, no, no. Let's do a demonstration. So she's going to demonstrate to you. She's also from Wellinger. She has been to Japan, Toyota and all the training. And now she's very much in business, supporting some clients in improving their quality, productivity, reducing lead time, and so on and so forth. She's also a professor in Wellinger Institute. Looks terribly young, no? Yeah, but then, yeah, profound knowledge and age don't
doesn't have this.
Yes. Okay. Sir, will you please take over, Shrutika, and give us a beautiful demonstration of how we can improve quality and reduce cost. This is based on a
Sure.
real life story which she has experienced with one of her students.
Let us all understand the case of Mihir, a t-shirt manufacturer who faced a lot of quality issues. So when Mihir started his family business, he faced a lot of quality issues and he used some simple techniques to improve his quality significantly. So when the defects were high, Mihir's setup for the factory was something like this. Just a second. Yes. So we had operators in the factory. There was a quality department. There was a rework department. And there was a packaging department. The operators would pick up a piece from the inbox, work on it, and place it on the outbox. After a regular interval of time, the pieces from this outbox were taken to the quality department. The quality department would check the quality of every piece. If the quality was as per the standards, they would take this piece forward to the packaging department. But if the quality of this t-shirt was not as per standards, they would take it to the rework department. Now, with this form of working, Mihir had almost 100 defects per 1,000 pieces he made. And trust me, this was killing his business. He had to do something about it. So Mihir had options. He could simply buy the highest quality precision machine, or simply he could increase the level of inspection in his factory. But if you observe, both these methods involve cost. Rather, Mihir, a FMB student from our batch, he's thought, why to invest unnecessary money? Let's change the method of working and simply improve the quality. So the new method of working was as follows. So as you can see, every workstation now was handed over or marked with a designated area. An operator would pick up a piece from the inbox here, start working on it, and if he had the slightest doubt related to the quality of this product, he would immediately stop working on it and he would place this product in this designated area out here. Now, trust me, the quality inspector from here, from our quality department, would walk through all the workstations and take regular rounds. Just a second. Now, once this quality inspector sees that there is a t-shirt placed in this doubt area, this was a visual indicator to the quality inspector that our operator 1 here was facing a problem in the quality of this product. He needed some help. So the quality inspector here would help him resolve all his queries. And once all the queries were resolved, only then the operator would start working back on this product. Now this technique used here is called as Jidoka, a technique Mihir learned from Japan. Now, Jidoka states the principle that whenever we are working on a piece of work and the onset of problem has started, we have started the problem right away. And if we cannot solve it on our own, we should not make any assumptions related to this product. Rather, we should ask for help. So with this mechanism of Jidoka, the defects were prevented from moving ahead to the quality station, then to the rework. And this QC operator out here, he helped enable quality check at source. Now you won't believe me, with this work, with this method of working, the rework person here, the reworks reduced to only 5. From 100 defects, we just reduced the defects to merely 5 pieces. And there was a twist in this story here. The rework person was now so idle that we started using him in production. So with the help of Jidoka and quality check at source, we improved the production, improved the quality, and also had one more person to help us improve the quality and production. So Dr. G, any views on this?
Oh, this is okay. Really beautiful. And thank you.
Thank you,
Shrutika.
sir.
Very
Thank you,
nicely demonstrated.
Thank you, sir.
So what is the message we learn from this? Just checking quality at the end, no use. Check earlier. When the problem starts, attack at that point. Get help if you can't solve it yourself. You know? There is never any shame in asking for help. Never. You should take help, but at the onset of the problem. Taking at the end is of no use. It is only rework. Already Rashmi showed you, rework has to be cut down. Now, how to cut down the rework? And what Shrutika has shown is a concrete method of cutting down rework. So it is not just enough to appeal to the psychology and the sociology, but technology is also required. Technique is also required. Did you catch a word that Shrutika spoke? Jidoka. J-I-D-O-K-H-A. Shrutika, you can put it up on the chat, please. That's where everybody can get it. Jidoka.
Sure.
But Jidoka is a Japanese word, which means don't allow a defect to pass on to the next process. There is, of course, a better way. It's called Pokayoke. Pokayoke is mistake proofing. Mistake proofing means what? Mistake proofing means you cannot make a mistake. Yeah, here is a simple example of Pokayoke. This is what everybody is familiar with, the mobile phone. And this is my charger. Okay, I have to put my charger in the mobile phone. But if I try putting it in the wrong way, it simply won't go. It has to be put in the right way. I can make a mistake. You look at your computer. In your computer, there are a lot of ports. You cannot put an HDMI cable into a USB port. Simple trick. Size is different. That's all. Yeah. Here's one. I'm going to move my camera. Can you see this fellow? This is the socket for a 5 ampere plug. Cannot put a 15 ampere plug. That is Poka-yoke. Yeah. Now, by doing Poka-yoke, mistakes can be completely prevented. However, everywhere, everything, Poka-yoke is not possible, unfortunately. So then you do Jidoka. So in Jidoka, the moment a problem starts, the moment there is a possibility of a defect, catch it, stop it, don't let it go ahead. In other words, bring the quality to source. Can you show that bangle again, please? The bangle. Yeah. Can Shrutika or Rashmi please show the bangle?
Yes.
Yeah. Show it on. Yes, correct. Yes. Now, if you can see the bangle, now there is a portion where it sort of connects. Is this bangle like that, or it's no connector? There is. Yeah. And many times these bangles have a diamond, especially in bangles which are exported. So the jewelry has got diamonds on that place. Huh? And there is a problem which is existing in all the jewelry industries. I have serviced 5 companies myself. All of them have a problem that when you put a rhodium coating that is done on white gold, when you do rhodium coating, you get into problem. The coating doesn't come properly. You have to uncoat and recoat. Very expensive. Rhodium is 10 times more expensive than gold. Of course, it is electroplated, so it's a very thin coating. But so what? It is expensive and it consumes time, and the product quality deteriorates. And just today, we had one of the jewelers applying a technique called differential diagnosis. It is one of our techniques. Maybe we'll hold a seminar on that if you're interested. Let us know if you're interested. Seminar on differential diagnosis, and a 20-year problem, not only in this company, but in the whole industry, was cracked in a matter of 4 days with experiments. Yeah. And they found a root cause. They found a root cause why there is a problem on that part of the bangle. And if you can show the bangle again, actually the reality was that if you look at the bangle, Rashmi is showing it, if you see where this joint, usually, yeah, that's correct. That's where the defect comes. And that's where the diamonds are put. Now, what was happening all along? Only this part had a defect. The rest of the bangle did not have a defect. But nobody had noticed this. They were all finding solutions to which apply to the whole bangle, like changing the method of electroplating, changing the concentration or something, and it wouldn't work. And using this technique, this guy cracked it in no time. And the solution he found was that when the bangle gets into electroplating, it should have certain characteristics which nobody was paying attention to. They were not paying attention because they were acceptable according to the quality standards. Yeah, the quality standard said that this is acceptable, the specification standard, and so nobody was paying attention to it. But today we discovered the specs are wrong, and when the specs are wrong, you cannot achieve the right quality. So you attack the specs, the problem has begun to disappear, right? So this is the next secret, quality at source. The great institutes like IITs, both Dr. Dargarkar, Prof. Kaustubh and myself are from IITs. You know what is so great about IITs, apart from the fact that both of us were students? Tough entrance exam. I'll tell you a secret. There is nothing great that they do in the institute. But the entrance exam is very tough. So at source, you take good students, then to be honest with you, now you teach them, doesn't matter. They'll go and find out on their own. We do the same thing in Wellinger. All these young ladies here now, even Dr. Karkhanis, he's also from Wellinger. And we do the same trick. Yeah. we used to take a lot of effort to teach and all. Then we realized, no, the secret is take good quality students. Then we can relax as professors. Don't tell this to anybody. Huh? But Wellinger makes it a point of quality at source. We take our students in a program called Family Managed Business, which was mentioned by Shrutika ma'am, and that student was from the FMB program. There's Gauri Ramesh here, who has just set up on the chat a comment saying, I benefited a lot from this program. She was in this program and she benefited a lot from it. That's true. So we take good students, learners, and if you take good students, then you give them, a little indication, and they will go all the way. In Marathi, we have a saying, "Bhatala dili osri, bhat pai pasri." Give an inch and the fellow takes right up to the elbow in English. So this is how our students are, and they work wonderful things. There are many such secrets we divulge. Just by one seminar of 1.5 hours, you won't become a master. I'm sorry. Even though you'll get good tips, good techniques, but you want the overall mastery, you should really join this course. You should really join this course. Yeah, Yangpu is the agency, who deals with it. So Dr. Samir Karkanis deals with this whole issue. But it's beautiful because there are so many techniques we cover. And there's one more technique I want to tell you. And this technique is also about pushing the quality checking backward and making sure right from the beginning you get good product. Okay, I'm going to call Rashmi once again. Can you tell us about this secret, please?
Yes. Dr. G said about getting the quality inspector to the source. So let's get it right away. Why wait for the piece to be done and in a lot go for checking? Make one piece, keep it aside. The quality inspector generally tends to be free in the first hour of the day. So what they can do is, instead of sitting and waiting for the pieces to come to them, they can move across the department and check all the pieces that have been kept in the boxes by the operators. So meanwhile, I keep working on this piece till the quality inspector comes to my department, my desk. I work on the second piece. I've kept this piece in the checking box. Once the inspector comes, he goes through the piece and gives a yes or a no. So if it's a no, he teaches me how to correct it there and then, so that I do not take this defect ahead, make more products with this defect. He teaches me there. It is called as on-the-job learning, is what you call Jidoka. So it teaches you there and then. It prevents the defect. While if the piece is great and good to go ahead, it gives a positive pat on my back that yes, I am doing a great work. And like I said, it will instill a pride of workmanship in me, and I will continue maintaining this standard and delivering a great product each time I make. So this is a maker and checker concept. I first self-check, I do it, I keep it aside and wait for the quality inspector to come at the source and detect it right there.
Do you know
yes,
what
Dr.
the
G.
experience was with this technique? We found that the quality inspectors were not required after a while, because people started self-checking, and then we could convert some of the inspectors into the operators. We got more productivity. Yeah. Once they check the first piece themselves, and if they find it's not okay, they make it okay. Now their mind is set, just like the machine, their mind is set. And with a mind set correctly, they will work wonders. A good deal is about mind setting. Yeah. And this is a skill which we have to learn ourselves and others. And one of the best ways of setting the mind is to declare yourself as a learner. Many times you will find opinions given or techniques told which don't go along with your experience. Your experience is the opposite. And you say, God, I don't agree with what he's saying. Instead of that, just try. Just try, and you'll find a magic happening. Hmm? Yes. Ultimately, it is the experiment, the shop floor, the reality of the place which teaches us. You know, Dr. Kaustubh gave the examples, and all the examples came from the what we call as Gemba. Gemba is the real place, and when you are dealing with customers, real place is the customer's mind. You need to go to the customer and then bring that information back and convert it into a product. There is a book which was mentioned by our introducer Nehal. You did a wonderful introduction for us. I would like to book you for introducing me every time, everywhere. Okay. She said she mentioned about a book called "You Don't Have to Be Rich to Solve Problems," and that's written by me and another professor called Dr. Tanvi Thakkar. She'll be doctor in a few months. You know, actually, we didn't write the book. Our students wrote the book. Our students wrote the book based on their experience, because they come in with a belief about their business which has come over generations. They learn some new things which are practical, which can be tried out. They try it out, it works, and then the daddy says, wow, अरे बेटे आपको इतना अक्कल है. I am surprised, you know. And then after a few days, the same daddy says, after all, my genes. No wonder my son is or daughter is so brilliant. This is what we achieve in the program. So it's all done by the students. We give them the concepts, but the concepts are very practical. That is important. Today, there is a tendency to go into jargon, theory, concepts. It's endless. But sir, madam, अपने को धंधा करने का है. We need cash. We need customer. We need to keep things moving. How to do that? And all these COVIDs and whatnot suddenly land on our head. How to survive in that situation? Yeah, we need to know much beyond what already exists. And today we've given you many ideas on what we can take beyond what already exists. Mir Satra, which Ms. Shrutika told us about. This guy had come to me. I'll just give you a quick example and close it and take your question answers. Already some question answer answered, but we'll take a few more. So Mir Satra, he came one day to me, you know, my business is growing. He's a trader, small warehouse in Dadar. Cannot expand in Dadar, in Mumbai, out of question. Too expensive. Shall I put in Bhiwandi or here and there? I was just saying, listening to the guy. He went away, no answer from me. But when you have good quality students, quality at source, don't have to worry. He thought over it. After 3 months, I contacted him. Where did you put the warehouse? He said, what warehouse? I eliminated the warehouse. I said, what? He said, sir, you have taught us what is warehouse. Material arrives, rate of arrival, and rate of departure. If there is a gap, arrival is too fast, departure is too slow, you get inventory. All that I did was spent energy in making a match, matching the arrival and the departure. Warehouse eliminated. Any other student from anywhere else would have put up the warehouse, would have put up money, energy, thoughts into what should the warehouse be. And there would be plenty of vendors selling them automated warehouses, warehouse management systems, ERPs, this, that, and whatnot. And I took a batch of students there, you know. And Mir said, oh, what are you bringing them here for? There is nothing to show. I said, that is what I want them to see. There is nothing to see. There is no warehouse and the business is growing. And guess what? The money that would have gone into the warehouse going into Mir's pocket. This is the trick. And you learn a lot of it Join our program. There is no age bar. People, old people can join, youngsters can join, anybody can join. Yeah, it's a relatively short program. Works very well. Yeah, and I want to tell you one more thing. These are all weird concepts. I learned them in Japan. Okay, Rashmi learned them in Japan. Kurshutika learned them in Japan. All of us have been to Japan. Vartika has been to Japan. Nehal has been to Japan. Dr. Kaustuba has been to Japan. We learned so much from there. Luckily, the whole of India looks west. They look at USA. Kuch nahi to at least Dubai, you know. Nobody looks east. And the most beautiful answers are in the east. Since nobody knows them and we have found them out, we sell them to the west. I have been to 23 countries. You know, Rashmi was in Mattel. Mattel is in Thailand. They invited her 3 months. Help us. This year also we were going to put students. Cannot, travel is restricted. Next year we'll put them again. Mattel is a $5 billion company. $5 billion. And these are the kind of products they make. Barbie dolls, Hot Wheel cars, and things like that. Yes. So even great corporations or small corporations, small businesses, they all benefit from the kind of thinking that we bring in. Right. I think this may be a good time to take a few question answers, and some of them are already answered. Madam Gauri has put up a comment. She says, I joined the family mission managed business at 45. You know, women don't readily tell their age. She's very kindly telling you just for your benefit. And she says that I learned a lot about business, didn't have a clue before. I'm doing it. Now, one more. You know, we come up with all these wild ideas. And there is a lady called Rucha Bindu. And she's in the audience right now. And she came up with, found out all these weird things. She's also a student. And she's written a book. She's written a book about a weird character called Dr. G. And that book is titled as The Memoirs of a Prickly Pear. You know, prickly pear, that's like cactus. It's hard and thorny on the outside, but soft on the inside. You have to penetrate the thorny part. That is always the difficulty. The first reaction is, oh no, this learning, Dr. G, you're telling me is thorny learning. I can't do it. I won't do it. But you try, you penetrate, you go in, and then it's nice, sweet. So this is the whole beauty of the technique. All that you require is a willingness and an attitude to say, let me try. Maybe what these guys say is wrong. Oh, let me try it. Let me try it. So you want to pay respect to us? Okay. You apply, try it out. You can connect with all of us on LinkedIn. We are, there was a comment made on one of my, we have YouTube videos also. We ourselves have been participants in that. And one comment was made is, Dr. G, you and your students are the gold standard of free education. But the free education is only in bits like today. And for the whole package, you need to join the course. So let's take some questions from you. Please go ahead.
We've had Sudhakar's hand raised for quite some time. Sudhakar, do you want to jump in and ask your question?
Actually, Nehal, there is a problem with speakers like you had today. We explained so clearly that there are no questions. And I'll tell you something about questions. I really appreciate that. I was in Japan, 37 years old, 1993. I was in a training program by Professor Tsuda, T-S-U-D-A. In Tamil, Suda means hot. So, and this guy was hot. Hot meaning maar dene wala. That kind of hot. And he used to, whatever questions we would ask. See, we are all used to asking questions. The American way is More questions you ask, the better you learn. So we used to ask him questions. He used to sneer at us and he used to say, you have a misconception. That's all. Sometimes he would sneer the other way around and say, you have a big misconception. And sometimes he would smile and say, you have a total misconception. So politely he was saying, shut up. And once, I went to him and asked him a question. I said, sir, this is a case study which you have given. There's something written here I cannot understand. Can you please explain to me? What does a good professor do? A good professor will explain. Will explain twice, 10 times if you don't understand. I ask you one question. If the professor answers your question, who becomes more intelligent? You or the professor? The professor. And who's paying? Who's paying the fees? You. Why are you paying fees to make the professor intelligent? I always ask this to my students. Huh? You ask the question to yourself. So this is what happened. I went to him, Professor Sudha, I have a difficulty. Can you please explain? He looked at me and he said, don't ask me. Go ask the process. I didn't understand. I said, sir, what do you mean? He said, you are going to go back to India, right? And you're going to pretend to be a big expert trained in Japan, right? Of course, yeah. What do you think? I think I'm going to come back from Japan and say, kuch nahi sikha. Of course, I'm going to say I'm an expert. So he said, that's your game. You're going to pretend to be a big expert trained in Japan, right? People will ask you questions, sir, please tell answer to this, answer to that. Some questions you'll have answers. There'll be many questions you don't have answers. You have only studied here for 1 month. Many questions you will not have answers. Who will answer them for you? And then he's back to his sneer and he says, do you think I'll follow you to your country to answer your questions? Even if I follow you, you cannot afford my charges, $2,000 a day. So who is going to answer your questions? And then he gave one of his rare smiles, and he said, go ask the process. The process is always giving you answers. You are not listening. You are not looking. Please learn to look, learn to observe, learn to keep quiet. Let your ears do the work. As they say, one mouth, 2 ears, double amount of work they have to do. And the process will give you answers. And it struck me, wow. So he says, go away, go ask the process. Thank you, Sensei. Okay. And I bowed and went back to my seat. I walked 4 or 5 meters to my seat. The thought struck me, hey, today I'm working in Godrej Soaps. I'm doing well. I'm going to move to the top. That is quite clear. In fact, the company has sent me to Japan on training. They have paid all the costs and so on. But if I can ask the process, I don't need to make soap all my life. I can go to any industry. I can go anywhere in the world. I don't understand language. I don't understand anything. You should see Rashmi's it's a 2-minute video on her, what she did in Bangkok. And one of the things she said is, language is not a barrier to communication. Yeah, in fact, when you can't understand the language, your observations become better. Yeah. So, yes. So I said, if I can understand by asking the process and getting the answers, hey, I can go anywhere in the world, any industry. Do you have a problem? Yes. Important problem, otherwise you won't pay me. Important problem, yes. Okay, I'll go ask the process. The process will give me answers. I will take the answers, give it to the management and charge my fee. And for the last 25 years, I have been in consulting, not yet printed a brochure. No need, because who is your best salesperson? Successful client is your best salesperson. They go around telling all their friends. And in India, there is a community bias. If one Kutchi is very successful, he tells all Kutchis. One Gujarati is successful, he tells all Gujaratis. One Marwadi is successful, tells all Marwadis. Which is very good. So you need only 3 clients, Kutchi, Gujarati and a Marwadi. and your life is made. So I sit like that with life made. Ladies and gentlemen, learn to ask the process. You'll see one example in your own home. All mothers understand when a baby cries. Baby has only one language, crying. But mother understands the crying is for milk, crying is for making vertical burping, crying is for going outside, crying is just to receive a hug or what. They understand that. Fathers, I am afraid, don't. For them, crying is just crying. Mothers know how to ask the process. It is God's gift. But what Professor Tsuda said, even if you don't have God's gift, you can earn it. You can learn it. Learn. You can learn it. Go stand in front of the process. The process will talk to you. Keep listening. Keep listening. Say, hey, the quality is bad. Please tell me. Process. Please tell me how to improve the quality, and you will get it. Yeah. There's one last question here about from Neelam Girish. Sir, how can fastening industries stand apart from their Chinese competitors? Join our course. You get the full answer. Yeah. But just look at one possibility. You need a unique selling proposition. One good reason why Chinese people are able to offer very cheap products. Do you see them? See, they're exporting, but do you see them roaming around trying to get sales? They have no marketing expenses. You go to Guangzhou in October, there is the Canton Fair. You attend the fair, there is an exhibition of thousands and thousands of companies. You place your order and come. Their marketing expenses is Guangzhou Fair. Whereas we have to sell, we have to go. You will find, I export karna hai, jarur. So that's we start making trips. Nothing wrong with that. Huh? Do make trips because you will understand the customer in the customer's workplace. Nothing wrong with that. Don't misunderstand, please. But just get the point. So what is your unique selling proposition which will beat the stuffing out of the Chinese? Obviously, it cannot be price. They'll always quote cheaper than you. But I have another client, it's called Parveen Industries, not client, sorry. This is one of those brilliant students we have, okay? Parveen Industries. And what they are in competition with China in the hydrocarbon industry. They manufacture things for the hydrocarbon industry. China always sells cheaper. They benchmark with China, but they always sell a little higher price. They never try to equate their price. You know one good reason? They give the customer exactly what they want, and their customer returns or customer complaints is below 0.01%. That is a polite way of saying zero. So they get the order even though it is competitive bidding and the Chinese are cheaper. You need to come up with something unique, something different, which hits the customer at the heart. And nobody better than Dr. Kaustubh Dhargarkar to do that. Just try him out. Maja aega. Yeah. You get totally different positioning. Yes, doctor. Please
another point about this specific question about how to beat the Chinese. Am I audible? Yeah. About how to beat the Chinese. I mean, one lesson somewhere in the late 90s, we used to manufacture some special purpose equipment, and we always used to face this competition from Taiwan. Chinese were not in the picture at that time. I'm talking about the late 90s. Okay. Our machines would be priced at say X. German machines would be priced at probably 4X or 5X. So in our customer segment, they were not a competition, but Taiwanese machines used to be priced as maybe 1.2X of our price, and they would be good. And a lot of times we used to lose to those Taiwanese fellows. So to understand how the Taiwanese operate, etc., I acted as a customer and gave some inquiries to Taiwanese companies. They promptly invited me over to their place. And three such, I posed as a buyer with 3 Taiwanese companies. And I went there, appointments on 3 different days. And, on day 1, the first company comes, takes me to their office to their machine shop, to their foundry, to their electronics assembly shop, etc., etc. So their entire facility is shown at different locations. Day two, the next company comes bring a big, nice limousine, take me around to their office, their foundry, their machine shop, X, Y, Z. Third day, same pattern with the third company. And by the end of the second day or in the middle of the third day, I realized that 3 or 4 of the facilities seem to be the same, but were positioned as belonging to different companies. What lesson does that teach you? At the front, these guys were competing with each other to get my business, but at the back end, they were kind of a syndicate in terms of manufacturing. So they were saving big time in terms of costs, but at the front end, they were posing as competitors. Now, when at the front end you pose as competitors, one of them is bound to get your business, right? You get what I'm saying? One of the 3 is bound to get the business, but at the back end, they're optimizing on their costs. Now, can you imagine us doing it in India? We compete with each other. We don't share our secrets with each other. We don't collaborate. So that's one lesson that we also need to take from these fellows, that how to collaborate effectively. Something that we miss. There is a joke that there are crabs being exported from India and crabs being exported from China. The container in which the Indian crabs are kept is left open from top, and the container in which the Chinese crabs are kept is kept blocked from the top. Why? Because the exporter or the importer knows that one Indian crab tries to climb up, the other fellow is going to pull him down. So that fellow is not going to reach the top and not going to escape. Whereas the Chinese crab, if one fellow tries to climb up, the other fellow is going to push him up, and all of them might escape from the top of the container. So close that top. So, we need to change our mindset regarding collaboration, creating win-win situations, which I constantly talk about. And, that's also been the focus of the book that I published this last week. Create win-win situations and you'll always win.
This kind of also answers the question that one of the attendees had posted, that what if, when I showed the FTP board, what if the good performer doesn't wish to reveal his secrets to the other lagging performers? So this kind of very well summarizes that answer.
At a micro level, then the HR is not doing the job properly. So catch the HR.
Yeah, that's right. There is no substitute for good relations.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, with suppliers and employees. Employees are also suppliers.
Absolutely.
They supply you 8 hours a day, brain hours, man hours, whatever. They supply you. And the only thing is, for them to stop supplying you, they have to give you 1 month's notice or something. And while they are supplying you, they cannot supply any other company. That's about all, but they are suppliers. And if your suppliers are weak, you cannot win the market. There is a saying, the strength of a company, somebody please type it in the chat. The strength of a company is only equal to the strength of its suppliers, never more. Weak suppliers, weak company. Strong suppliers, strong company. Most companies understand this about their employees. Many times they don't understand about suppliers. Yeah. And in Toyota, they have a consortium of suppliers. It's called Kiretsu in Japanese. Don't worry about the Japanese word. But the suppliers are like family members. In the same way, we also look at, we are suppliers to students. Students are our customers. We say we are family members. We have to establish a relationship. Relationship is not about passing exams. वो तो करना ही है, ठीक है, हाँ. But relationship is what will take your business and joy in life for years and years and years to come. Great. Yeah.
One message. I want you to read this line, all of you. User first, technology later. all our examples have been about the user first, bringing the appropriate technology later. Be it my story about creating a completely different product line from presses moving to productivity enhancement. We put the user first, understood the user, then we brought in the appropriate technology. Second example, which I gave you about my disastrous failure, at that time, we put technology first and forgot about the user. That led to a decline. Then even the BPO example, the actual answer came from the person who was in connect with the prospect at the last mile. As Dr. G calls it, be in touch with the Genba. So remember this, user first, technology later. You will 9 out of 10 times or 10 out of 10 times will be successful. The reasons for failure will automatically go out of your ventures and businesses. Thanks. That's something I wanted to share.
Nehal, it's exactly 8:30. We started dot on time. So
Yes, sir. Okay, wow, wow, wow. I think it's been 10 years that I know Dr. G and KD sir, and they still don't stop to amaze me, honestly. And I'd like to just tell you all something that, you know, I started my own business and I've learned such amazing life hacks from both of them that it saved me a lot of money and time and helped me immensely in taking my business forward. And I'm sure Sir KD sir and Dr. G that, you know, if we were in an auditorium, all we could hear right now were applauses from our audience, because I'm sure everyone is floored right now. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, KD sir. Thank you, Dr. G. We'd like to especially thank our alma mater, V School, and that's where we all met. That's where we all are from. So thank you, everyone. It's been immensely you know, today marks the beginning of the journey of learning for all of us. We will be sending out emails to all of you with links to the books that we were talking about that KD sir and Dr. G have written, along with the, you know, with the recording of this session. So we look forward to, you know, developing a relationship with all of you now. Remember, like Dr. G said, develop the learning attitude, and today is the beginning for that. Thank you, everybody.
thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.